So folks, today we are taking a look at a new and very interesting lens from Viltrox. This is the 85 1.4 Pro. We are already familiar with the Pro series from Viltrox through their APS-C lenses, like the 75 1.2 or the 27 1.2, which were very well received in the community. That's why I'm super curious to see what this series brings to the full-frame photography side of things. Especially since the Lab series, positioned a bit higher, has already impressed me very much. So let's dive in. I'm David, you are watching Division in English, and let's go. For a long time there was basically only one budget 85 1.4 lens for Sony's E-mount, and that's the Samyang. Great lens, but also has its flaws, even compared to the Sigma 85 1.4 DG DN. And that was even a better choice over Sony's 85 1.4 GM in version 1. Then at the end of last year, Sony reworked the 85 1.4 to a GM2, and Sirui launched a budget-friendly 85 1.4 option with the Aurora line. Then there's also the Meike 85 1.4 STM, and so there are plenty of options for this beloved portrait focal length, and Viltrox wants something of that cake as well. The 85 1.4 Pro is priced between the Sirui Aurora and the Sigma 85 1.4 DG DN, with a cost of 670 euros here in Europe. At first glance, a fair price. Let's see what this lens delivers. The lens measures 180mm in length and had a diameter of 84mm and weighs a solid 800 grams. That's heavy. For its weight, the lens is very compact and handles very well on Sony bodies. The 77mm filter thread is standard for 85 1.4 lenses. However, what immediately caught my attention is the lens's rattling. It rattles like crazy. This is due to the VCM autofocus motors used here, which here produce even a much louder rattle than Canon's VCM lenses. It's a shame. Personally, I think it's quite annoying, but reportedly it doesn't affect the usability and the image quality in practice. I just can't imagine that so much movement inside the lens is good for its longevity. And otherwise the build quality is exceptional. The lens is made of metal and closely resembles the APS-C lenses from Viltrox that were introduced a few years ago. And impressively, the lens is even sealed against dust and splashes. There's an aperture ring that can be clicked and declicked and locks firmly into the A position if you don't want to use it. The focus ring is also metal and offers a pleasant resistance. There's an AF/MF switch and a customizable button as well. The lens consists of 15 elements in 11 groups and features an 11-bladed aperture diaphragm. The minimum focusing distance is around 80 centimeters. That's typical for such a portrait lens in this focal range, and it becomes particularly relevant when looking at the performance. But before we dive into that, a quick request. If you enjoyed my work here and videos, but you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please consider doing so to support my work. Thank you, and back to the program. In terms of sharpness, the lens leaves little to be desired. My test shots from the mountains to the valley are razor sharp edge to edge. That's excellent. There's only a minimal increase in sharpness when stopping down to like f2. But it's negligible in practice. For portraits, sharpness is usually where it needs to be, and the lens has no trouble resolving the 61 megapixels of my A7R5, even at 1.4 aperture. For a relatively affordable 85 1.4 lens, this is impressively good. Something I personally didn't expect. But here's the catch. The lens shows significant differences in sharpness depending on the focusing distance. At near infinity with my test shots, or at standard portrait distances like 1.5 to 5 meters, everything is fine, with no issue in contrast or sharpness, razor sharp images. However, as you approach the minimum focusing distance, the micro contrast and sharpness drops entirely, leaving a mushy focus plane like you can see here at the ruler at close focus. You can no longer pinpoint where the focus plane even is. As the distance increases, the sharpness improves steadily, but this is still disappointing. Unfortunately, it's not a new issue entirely, but it remains frustrating. Sigma's 35 1.4 DGDN has the same problem. Near the minimum focusing distance, you need to stop down for usable sharpness. However, at standard portrait distances, there's no issues here, but this is something that you need to keep in mind. I personally could use this lens very well, since I don't use the close focusing capabilities of such lenses usually. On the upside, there's nothing to fear when it comes to chromatic aberrations. In practical use, even in tough backlit situations, I didn't encounter colorful fringing at all, not at once. That's a top-notch performance in terms of CAs for a 670 euros lens. It's even outperforming Canon's 2000 euros lenses. Only when you pushed your luck very hard with branches against the bright sky at f1.4, at 100% you can spot minor CAs on the leaves, but nothing to worry about at all. The same goes for longitudinal chromatic aberrations, shortly LOCA, the color shifts in foreground and background blur. While they are present, especially at f1.4 and f2, they are minimal and weren't an issue in practice. At f1.4, you don't see them clearly because of the lack of sharpness at the close focusing distance. But one of the best aspects of this lens is its beautiful bokeh, a crucial factor for 85 1.4 portrait lens. The separation is excellent in both real-world portraits and my test shots of my bokeh wall. The bokeh circles remain round towards the edges, with just a few cat's eye effects and pleasantly clear circles towards the edge. In practical use, this results in fantastic subject separation and beautiful 3D pop effects, making your subject stand out from the background, and that's exactly what you want this kind of lens for. I love it. Its bokeh competes even with the much more expensive Sony G Master version 2. And vignetting and distortion, on the other hand, are virtually non-existent, putting this lens ahead of Sigma in this regard. However, the lens's biggest drawback is its coatings. Much like Viltrox APS-C Pro lenses, its flare resistance is poor. It flares strongly when light enters from the side of the frame, and it produces a ghosting and rainbow flare effect when the light source is within or just out of the frame. While not perfect, these characteristics can add a certain charm to your image if you like them. Depending on your style, and if you want to use the lens hood, you will see less of this. And it even gets less if you don't use the sun as the backlit for your subject. And regarding autofocus, I encountered a few issues. I used firmware 1.02 of the lens, and with continuous autofocus on my Sony a7R5, the lens occasionally hunted and pulsed for finding the subject. However, this wasn't noticeable during my portrait shoot last week. I couldn't clearly reproduce it at all, but it was there. Sony has since released the firmware 1.03, supposedly solving these issues, exactly these AFC issues. It's hard to confirm if there's a significant improvement if I couldn't reproduce it at all, but Viltrox seems committed to addressing concerns and also has now some years of experience in Sony's autofocus. If you are considering this lens, just make sure to check its firmware version and available updates. And while 85mm isn't the most common focal length for video, it's occasionally useful for the same reasons as it's great for photos: subject separation. In video use, the lens performs remarkably well, showing just minimal focus breathing at all. Just unlike the 35 1.2 lab. The focal length doesn't change noticeably here when adjusting the focus distance. Ultimately, this lens is a very well-rounded package, especially for its 670 euros price tag here in Europe, even better overseas with just $600. But while sharpness drops significantly near the minimum focusing distance, it excels at standard working distances. Still sucks as a downside with this minimum focusing issue, but the CA performance, the bokeh, the vignetting control, it's all exceptionally. And while the flare resistance isn't great, it could add character to your images. Autofocus issues on my a7R5 were minor and likely resolved with the latest firmware, and Viltrox also, like I said, has some years of experience with Sony's autofocus now. For me, this is a highly recommendable lens. But the weight and the rattling from the VCM autofocus motor might annoy some users. The only thing in question is how much better is it compared to the Zero Re. That is a little less sharp, but smaller, lighter and cheaper, with also nice bokeh and not so much chromatic aberrations. But let me know what you think of this lens. Drop your thoughts down in the comments below or join my Discord server, but that's in German. If you decide to purchase this lens, you can save 5% with my discount code in the Viltrox store. And as always, I will link various shops in the video description, and buying through these links supports my channel at no additional cost to you, helping me continue creating content like this. And if you enjoyed this video, leave it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to hit the bell to stay updated on future videos. Here are 2 more videos you might want to watch next. And that's it for today, and see you next time.